Why are you happy? My pregnant wife asked. Because you're pregnant and I'm not the father, I replied calmly. By dessert, her world was already over. But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Andrew Harlan had always believed in patterns. In the logistics business, patterns meant survival. Trucks arrived on schedule, inventory moved through warehouses in predictable waves, and numbers balanced at the end of every quarter. His life had operated on the same principle: predictable, ordered, manageable. Until it didn't. The two-story house in Warren Grove sat quiet under the October sky, its beige siding blending seamlessly with every other home on Maple Drive. The neighborhood was a study in sameness. Trimmed lawns that all reached exactly 3 inches, mailboxes painted regulation black, driveways swept clean of leaves before they could accumulate. It was the kind of place where people waved from porches and knew their neighbors' first names, but not their secrets. Andrew pulled his truck into the driveway at 6:15, exactly as he did every weekday evening. The engine ticked as it cooled. He sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house he'd been paying for over the last 8 years. The mortgage was reasonable. The neighborhood was safe. Everything about this place screamed stability. But stability, Andrew had recently learned, could be a carefully constructed lie. He grabbed his work bag from the passenger seat and climbed out. The autumn air carried the smell of someone's fireplace 3 houses down, mixing with the faint scent of dying leaves. Somewhere a dog barked. A car door slammed. Normal sounds in a normal neighborhood. Susan's sedan sat in the garage, exactly where it always was by this time. She'd stopped working 6 weeks ago, right after the second trimester ended. Doctor's orders, she'd said. The pregnancy had been difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Fatigue that kept her in bed until noon. Andrew had picked up extra shifts to cover the lost income without complaint. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house smelled like marinara sauce and garlic bread. The television murmured from the living room. Some home improvement show Susan liked to watch. Andrew set his bag down by the stairs and walked toward the kitchen, his work boots heavy on the hardwood floor. Susan stood at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta. 7 months pregnant, her belly pronounced beneath a loose gray sweater. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and when she turned to look at him, her smile was soft, gentle, practiced. Hey, she said, dinner's almost ready. Smells good. Andrew washed his hands at the kitchen sink, the water hot enough to sting. He dried them slowly, watching Susan move around the kitchen with careful, deliberate movements. Everything she did lately seemed choreographed, as if she were performing for an invisible audience. He noticed it 3 weeks ago, the way she tilted her head when speaking to neighbors, the way her voice took on a particular tremor when discussing the pregnancy, the way she mentioned his name with just the slightest hesitation, as if speaking about someone distant, someone she wasn't quite sure of anymore. Andrew Harlan had built his career on noticing patterns, and Susan had become predictable in all the wrong ways. They sat down to eat at the small dining table wedged between the kitchen and living room. Susan served the pasta with a side salad, her movements slow and tired. She eased herself into the chair across from him with a small sigh, one hand supporting her lower back. "How was work?" she asked, forking lettuce into her mouth. "Busy. Thompson called in sick again, so I had to cover his route. That's the 3rd time this month. 4th. Silence settled between them. The kind of silence that had become normal over the past several weeks. Not comfortable, but familiar. Susan pushed pasta around her plate, occasionally glancing up at him with an expression Andrew couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "You seem different today," she said finally. Andrew cut a piece of garlic bread, keeping his movements calm and measured. "Different how? I don't know. Lighter, maybe." She paused, her fork hovering over her plate. "Why are you happy?" The question hung in the air between them. Andrew chewed slowly, taking his time, letting the silence stretch. He could feel Susan's eyes on him, watching, waiting. He set down his fork and reached for his water glass, took a long drink, then carefully placed the glass back on the table. When he spoke, his voice was level, matter of fact, the same tone he used when explaining shipping delays to frustrated clients. Because you're pregnant. Susan blinked. Her lips curved into a confused half-smile. I know I'm pregnant, Andrew. We've known for months. Right? Andrew folded his napkin, smoothing out the creases with precise movements. And I'm not the father. The fork slipped from Susan's hand. It hit the plate with a sharp clatter that seemed to echo in the quiet room. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Color drained from her face, then rushed back in blotches across her cheeks. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. Andrew leaned back in his chair, arms crossed loosely over his chest. His heart was beating faster than normal, but his exterior remained calm. 8 years of marriage had taught him that emotional displays accomplished nothing. Facts did. The dates don't work, he said. I was in Cincinnati for that distribution conference from February 10th through the 18th. 9 days. You conceived during that window. Susan's hands moved to her belly in what looked like an automatic gesture, protective and defensive at once. She shook her head. That's sick. Why would you say something like that? Because it's true. You're calling me a liar? Her voice started to shake. Tears welled in her eyes, building at the corners, threatening to spill over. You're accusing me while I'm sitting here carrying your child? I already scheduled a DNA test. The tears spilled then, running down her cheeks in perfectly timed tracks. Susan stood abruptly, the chair scraping backward across the floor. One hand clutched her belly, the other pressed against her mouth. She stared at him with wide, wounded eyes. What kind of man does this? She said, her voice breaking on every word. What kind of man accuses his pregnant wife of cheating? Andrew stood too, slower, controlled. He looked at her across the table. The woman he'd married 8 years ago. The woman who'd shared his bed and his life and his dreams of building something stable together. The woman who'd lied to his face for months. The kind of man who doesn't let lies finish growing. He walked past her, heading for the stairs. Behind him, Susan's sobs grew louder, more theatrical. Andrew didn't turn around. He climbed the steps to the second floor, walked into the guest bedroom, and closed the door behind him. The room was small and plain, furnished with a single bed and a dresser they bought at a yard sale years ago. Andrew sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out his phone. The confirmation email from the DNA testing lab was still in his inbox. Appointment scheduled for October 23rd. 2 weeks away. He'd known for certain 3 weeks ago, after going through old credit card statements. A hotel charge on February 14th. Valentine's Day. While he'd been giving a presentation on supply chain optimization 200 miles away, Susan had been at the Garden Inn on Route 40, 45 minutes from home. The receipt showed a room for 2. Andrew had called the hotel, claimed he'd lost something during his stay, asked to confirm the date and room number. The clerk had been helpful. Room 217. Checked in at 2:30 p.m., checked out at 11 a.m. the following morning. There were other things, too. Small irregularities that formed a pattern once you knew what to look for. The yoga class that met on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, but had no online presence. The new perfume. The way she angled her phone away when texting. The sudden interest in her appearance after years of comfortable indifference. Patterns. Andrew lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. From downstairs, he could hear Susan moving around, her footsteps heavier than normal, punctuated by small sounds that might have been crying or might have been something else entirely. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother, Jake, asking about weekend plans. Andrew ignored it. He'd tell Jake eventually, but not yet. Not until he had documentation. Not until there was proof that couldn't be argued away or reframed. Because Susan was already building her narrative. He could feel in the way she'd responded tonight, the instant tears, the outrage, the victimhood. She would paint herself as the wounded party, the pregnant wife betrayed by a cold, suspicious husband. And people would believe her, at least at first. Andrew closed his eyes and let the quiet settle around him. The house made its familiar night sounds. The furnace clicking on, the refrigerator humming, the old pipes creaking as water moved through the walls. Sounds he'd heard 1,000 times before. Everything was about to change. But for the first time in months, Andrew felt something close to peace. The uncertainty was over. The pretending was done. All that remained was watching the truth unfold. 3 days later, Susan posted on social media. Andrew saw it when his phone started buzzing during lunch. Text messages from 3 different cousins, a former coworker, and his mother. All of them basically said the same thing. "Are you okay? What's going on?" He opened the app he rarely used and found Susan's post at the top of his feed. The photo showed her sitting in the nursery they'd started preparing last month, one hand on her belly, her face angled down with an expression of profound sadness. The caption beneath was 3 paragraphs long. "Sometimes you think you know someone. You build a life together, make plans together, and then one day everything changes. Being pregnant should be the happiest time of my life. But instead I'm dealing with accusations I never thought I'd hear from the person who's supposed to love me most. The stress isn't good for the baby, but I'm trying to stay strong. I just want what's best for our child, even if that means facing this alone." The post had 63 likes and 27 comments in the 2 hours since she'd shared it. Andrew scrolled through them. "Stay strong, girl. You deserve better. Praying for you and baby. Can't believe Andrew would do this. Sending love." His mother had commented, "Call me. We need to talk." Andrew put his phone face down on the break room table. Around him, the warehouse continued its daily rhythm. Forklifts beeping, pallets scraping across concrete, men shouting coordinates across the loading dock. Normal chaos. Predictable. Thompson sat down across from him, unwrapping a sandwich. "You good, man? You look like someone ran over your dog." "Don't have a dog." Figure of speech. Thompson took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Susan okay? Baby okay?" "Baby's fine. But Susan is—" Andrew picked up his phone and stood. "I need to make a call." He walked outside into the parking lot, where October wind cut through his work jacket and made his eyes water. The sky was gray, promising rain. Andrew dialed his lawyer's office and waited through 2 rings before the receptionist picked up. "Rourke and Associates. This is Andrew Harlan. I need to speak with Dennis." "One moment, please." Hold music played, something classical and vaguely depressing. Andrew watched a semi-truck back into the loading bay, its backup alarm cutting through the ambient noise. "Andrew." Dennis Rourke's voice came on the line, calm and professional. "What can I do for you?" "I need to file for divorce." A pause. "All right. When can you come in?" "Tomorrow. After work." 5:30 work for you?" "Yeah." "Bring whatever documentation you have. Financial records, communication logs, anything relevant to the separation of assets." "What about the DNA test?" "When's it scheduled?" 2 weeks from today." "Good. We'll file after the results come back. It'll be cleaner that way." Dennis paused. "How's Susan taking this?" "She's already playing victim on social media." "Of course she is." A rustling sound, like papers being shuffled. "Document everything. Screenshots, saved messages, eyewitness accounts if possible. Don't engage publicly. Don't respond to her posts. Let her build her narrative, then we'll dismantle it with facts." "Understood." "Andrew." Dennis's voice softened slightly. "This is going to get ugly before it gets better. Be prepared for that." "I am." Andrew ended the call and stood in the parking lot for another minute, watching the gray clouds roll in from the west. His phone buzzed again. More messages, more concerned friends and family asking what was happening. He ignored all of them and went back inside. The warehouse was warm and loud and blessedly uncomplicated. Numbers on screens. Boxes moving from point A to point B. Predictable patterns. The DNA test appointment fell on a Thursday morning. Andrew had taken the day off work, telling his supervisor he had a medical appointment. Not technically a lie. The clinic was in a strip mall between a tax preparation office and a discount furniture store. Plain brick exterior, tinted windows, a sign that read Precision Labs in blue letters. Andrew parked in front and sat in his truck for a moment, engine running, heat blasting against the autumn chill. Susan had refused to come. She'd sent him a text that morning. "I won't participate in this humiliation. You're on your own." That was fine. The test only required the father's sample and the mother's consent, which Susan had provided through their lawyer after several days of back-and-forth arguments. She'd finally signed the paperwork when Dennis explained that refusal would look suspicious in court. Andrew cut the engine and went inside. The waiting room was empty except for a woman reading a magazine and a man scrolling through his phone. Soft music played from hidden speakers, the kind of generic instrumental that existed solely to fill silence. The receptionist smiled at him from behind a plexiglass partition. Name? Andrew Harlan. She typed something into her computer. Paternity test? Yes. I'll need to see your ID and have you fill out these forms. Andrew provided his driver's license and took the clipboard she offered. The forms were standard medical intake paperwork, asking about insurance and medical history and current medications. He filled them out mechanically, his handwriting neat and precise. 10 minutes later, a technician called his name. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with bright purple hair pulled into a tight bun. She led him down a hallway into a small examination room. "This'll be quick," she said, pulling on latex gloves. "Just need a cheek swab. Open wide." Andrew opened his mouth. The swab scraped along the inside of his cheek, oddly uncomfortable. The technician worked efficiently, sealing the sample in a plastic tube and labeling it with a barcode. "Results take 5 to 7 business days," she said. "You'll get an email with a secure link to access them." "Thank you." He drove home in silence. No radio, just the sound of his tires on asphalt and the occasional gust of wind hitting the truck's side panels. The sky had cleared since morning, revealing pale blue October sunshine that did nothing to warm the air. The house was empty when he arrived. Susan had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying at my sister's for a few days. Need space." Andrew crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. He went upstairs to the guest bedroom, his bedroom now, and opened his laptop. The divorce filing sat in his documents folder, a 23-page PDF that Dennis had sent over 2 days ago. Andrew had read it 3 times already, but he opened it again now and scrolled through. Petitioner requests dissolution of marriage on grounds of irreconcilable differences. No contested assets requiring immediate division. Child custody to be determined pending paternity verification. Clean. Clinical. Every detail mapped out in legal language that reduced 8 years of marriage to a series of bullet points and whereas clauses. His phone buzzed. Jake calling. Andrew let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Hey man, Mom called me. She's worried. Susan's telling everyone you lost your mind, saying you're paranoid and cruel. I don't know what's going on, but call me back, okay? I'm on your side, whatever's happening." Andrew saved the message and set his phone aside. He'd call Jake eventually, when he had proof. Until then, all he could offer was his word against Susan's carefully crafted victimhood. And words meant nothing when someone cried on cue. The next 5 days moved with excruciating slowness. Andrew went to work, came home, ate simple meals, and slept in the guest bedroom. Susan stayed at her sister's house. Their shared existence had fractured completely, leaving only the skeletal structure of legal proceedings and financial obligations. On Monday, Susan's lawyer sent a demand letter. Dennis forwarded it to Andrew with a brief note. Aggressive opening position. Don't panic. The demands were extensive. Full custody of the child, with supervised visitation for Andrew. The house to remain in Susan's name. Retroactive child support starting from date of conception. Long-term alimony calculated at 40% of Andrew's gross income. Coverage of all pregnancy-related medical expenses. Dennis called that evening. "She's playing hardball. Can she actually get all that? If you were the father and she could prove abandonment or cruelty, maybe, but you're not the father, and her entire case is built on a lie." A pause. "When do the test results come in?" "Tomorrow or Wednesday. The moment you get them, call me. We'll file immediately." The email arrived Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. Andrew was drinking coffee in the kitchen, watching the sun rise through the window above the sink. His phone chimed. He set down his mug and opened the message. "Your DNA test results are ready. Click here to view your secure report." Andrew's hand was steady as he clicked the link. The page loaded quickly, displaying the lab's logo and a wall of text. His eyes skipped past the technical explanations and legal disclaimers. landing on the conclusion at the bottom of the first page. Alleged father, Andrew J. Harlan. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion, Andrew J. Harlan is excluded as the biological father of the tested fetus with 100% certainty. Andrew read it twice, then a third time. Then he took a screenshot and forwarded it to Dennis with a single word, confirmed. The response came back in under a minute. Come to my office. Now, Dennis Rourke practiced law out of a small office in downtown Warren, a 3-story brick building that shared space with an insurance agency and a financial advisor. His office was on the 2nd floor, accessible via a narrow staircase that creaked with every step. Andrew had only been here once before, 8 years ago, when he and Susan bought the house and needed someone to review the mortgage paperwork. The office looked the same, cluttered desk, filing cabinets lining the walls, framed degrees from Ohio State and Case Western. Dennis sat behind his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the DNA results on his computer screen. He was in his early 50s, gray hair thinning at the crown, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent decades dealing with other people's worst days. Sit, he said without looking up. Andrew sat in the worn leather chair across from a desk. Through the window behind Dennis, he could see the courthouse 3 blocks away, its stone facade imposing even at a distance. Dennis finished reading and removed his glasses, setting them carefully on the desk. 0%. Not even close. I know. This changes everything. She committed fraud, attempted to secure child support and alimony through deliberate misrepresentation. Dennis opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder. We filed a divorce petition today. We also submit the DNA results with a motion to dismiss any and all financial claims related to the pregnancy. What about custody? She has no grounds for supervised visitation now. You're not the father. The custody dispute is irrelevant. Dennis leaned back in his chair. But here's what's going to happen. Susan will deny the results. She'll claim the test was tampered with, or that you pressured her, or that the lab made a mistake. She'll keep lying because admitting the truth means losing everything. Let her lie. She'll also likely claim emotional distress. Pregnant woman betrayed by cold husband. That narrative plays well in public. Dennis tapped his pen against the desk. But it falls apart in court when we introduce evidence. The hotel receipt, phone records, text messages. We build a timeline that proves infidelity, and we do it methodically. How long? First hearing is in 3 weeks. We'll present the DNA results and request dismissal of her financial demands. If she contests, which she will, we go to trial. Could be 2 months, could be 4. Andrew nodded slowly. And if she keeps lying under oath? Dennis smiled, thin and humorless. Then she commits perjury, and perjury has consequences. The filing went through that afternoon. By evening, Susan's lawyer had received the documents and called Dennis in a rage. Andrew wasn't on the call, but Dennis relayed the highlights afterward. Her attorney did not know about the affair, Dennis said. Or, if he did, Susan never told him you had proof. He's furious, threatened to withdraw from the case. Will he? Probably not. But he knows his client lied to him, and that changes the dynamic. He'll advise her to settle. Will she? Dennis laughed. Absolutely not. She's in too deep. Settling means admitting everything. She'll fight until there's nothing left to fight with. That night, Susan called Andrew for the first time in over a week. He let it ring 4 times before answering. What? Her voice was ragged, stripped of its usual careful modulation. You sent the test results to my lawyer. Yes. It's wrong. The test is wrong. Andrew said nothing. You pressured me. Susan's voice rose, shaking with either genuine emotion or practiced hysteria. You forced me to take that test. It's not accurate. It can't be. The lab used standard protocols. 99.9% accuracy. You're doing this to hurt me. To punish me for. She stopped. For what? Silence on the other end. Andrew could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. I need you to withdraw the filing, she said finally. We can work this out. Go to counseling. Fix things. No. Andrew, please. I'm begging you. Think about the baby. I'm thinking about the baby. It's not mine. That's the point. You're going to abandon a pregnant woman? Her voice turned sharp, accusatory. Everyone's going to see what kind of person you really are. Let them. He ended the call. His hands were shaking slightly, the only outward sign of the adrenaline coursing through his system. Andrew set the phone on the kitchen counter and gripped the edge of the sink, staring down at the drain. 8 years. 8 years of building something together, and it had all been a performance. How long had she been lying? Just this once, or had there been others? How many nights had she come home late, explaining it away with yoga classes or coffee with friends, while Andrew trusted her implicitly? Patterns. He should have seen them sooner. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Susan escalated her public campaign, posting daily updates about her emotional state, the stress of the situation, her fears for the baby's health. Friends rallied around her. Family members called Andrew, demanding explanations. His mother came to the house and stood in the driveway until he agreed to let her in. She says, "You've accused her of terrible things," his mother said, sitting at the kitchen table with her coat still buttoned. "She's crying every day. People are worried. People should worry about the truth." "And what is the truth, Andrew?" He pulled up the DNA results on his phone and slid it across the table. His mother read slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something harder to define. "Oh my God, the baby isn't mine. She cheated. Now she's lying about it to get money." His mother set the phone down carefully. "Have you told anyone else?" "My lawyer. You need to tell people. Your family. Your friends. Everyone who's hearing her version." "Not yet. Let her keep talking. Let her dig the hole deeper. When the truth comes out, it'll hit harder." His mother studied him for a long moment. "You've changed." "No, I just stopped pretending." The courthouse in Warren was a gray stone building with tall windows and a brass plaque by the entrance listing judges who'd served since 1887. Andrew arrived at 8:30 a.m. for the 9 o'clock hearing, dressed in the same navy suit he'd worn to his wedding 8 years ago. It still fit, though the jacket felt tighter around the shoulders. Dennis met him in the hallway outside courtroom 3. "Ready?" "Yes." "Susan's here. She brought her sister and 2 friends for support. Don't react to anything they say or do." They entered the courtroom. It was smaller than Andrew expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. Susan sat on the opposite side with her lawyer, a heavy-set man in his 60s named Gerald Pierce. She wore a maternity dress in soft blue, her hair styled carefully, makeup subtle. When she saw Andrew, she looked away quickly, one hand moving to her belly. The judge entered promptly at 9. Honorable Patricia Weaver, according to the nameplate on her desk. She was in her 50s, gray hair cut short, reading glasses dangling from a chain around her neck. "This is case number 24, DR, 1847, Harlan versus Harlan. Dissolution of marriage and disputed financial claims." Judge Weaver shuffled papers. "Mr. Pierce, your client has submitted extensive demands. Mr. Rourke, your client has filed a motion to dismiss." "Let's start there." Dennis stood. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss all financial claims related to the pregnancy based on DNA evidence that conclusively excludes my client as the biological father." Gerald Pierce stood as well. "Your Honor, those test results are disputed. My client believes they may have been tampered with or obtained under duress." Judge Weaver looked at Susan. "Mrs. Harlan, did your husband force you to take this test?" Susan stood slowly, both hands supporting her lower back. "He threatened to make things difficult if I didn't cooperate." "That's not duress. That's negotiation." Judge Weaver gestured at the papers in front of her. "The lab results are from Precision Labs, an accredited facility. Do you have evidence of tampering?" "No, but..." "Then I'm inclined to accept them as accurate. Mr. Harlan is not the father. Therefore, he has no obligation for child support or pregnancy-related expenses." She looked at Gerald Pierce. "Does your client contest this conclusion?" Pierce conferred quietly with Susan. She was shaking her head, lips moving rapidly. Finally, Pierce stood. "My client maintains that the pregnancy occurred during the marriage and that Mr. Harlan has an obligation to a child that isn't biologically his." Judge Weaver's eyebrows rose. "On what legal grounds?" "Emotional distress. Abandonment during a vulnerable time." "Mr. Rourke?" Dennis stood again. Your Honor, my client discovered the infidelity and took appropriate legal action. There's no abandonment, just refusal to participate in fraud. Fraud is a strong word, Mr. Rourke, but accurate, Your Honor. Mrs. Harlan knew the child wasn't her husband's and chose not to disclose this information while demanding financial support. Judge Weaver looked at Susan again. Mrs. Harlan, when did you become aware of the paternity discrepancy? Susan's face crumpled. Tears welled and spilled in the same perfectly timed way Andrew had seen dozens of times before. I thought. You thought what? I didn't know for certain. The dates were close. But you knew there was doubt? Silence. Susan's lawyer put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. I made a mistake, she said, voice breaking. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So you attempted to secure financial support from a man who might not be the father? I just wanted stability for my baby. Judge Weaver removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Mrs. Harlan, I'm sympathetic to your situation. Being pregnant and facing a divorce is undoubtedly difficult. However, you cannot claim financial support from someone who is not the biological parent, particularly when you were aware of this possibility and chose not to disclose it. She put her glasses back on and looked at both lawyers. I'm denying all financial claims related to the pregnancy. Mr. Harlan is under no obligation for child support, medical expenses, or any other costs. The dissolution of marriage will proceed as an uncontested divorce with equitable asset distribution. Your Honor, Pierce said, my client also requests the marital home and long-term alimony. On what grounds? She's unable to work due to the pregnancy, a temporary condition that Mr. Harlan did not cause. Denied. Judge Weaver made a note. The house will be sold and proceeds split evenly unless one party wishes to buy out the other's share. Alimony is denied. Are there any other contested issues? Pierce looked at Susan, who was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. He sighed. No, Your Honor. Then we'll reconvene in 30 days to finalize the asset division. Court adjourned. The gavel struck. Andrew remained seated as the judge left. Across the aisle, Susan stood with help from her sister, still crying. She looked at Andrew once, her expression twisted with anger and desperation. This isn't over, she said, loud enough for the whole courtroom to hear. You'll regret this. Dennis touched Andrew's arm. Let's go. They left through a side door, avoiding the hallway where Susan's support group had gathered. Outside, the November air was cold and sharp. Dennis walked Andrew to his truck. That went better than expected, Dennis said. Weaver's tough but fair. She saw through the performance. Susan's going to appeal. Let her. The DNA evidence is ironclad. She has no legal standing. Dennis paused. But she's going to keep playing the victim publicly. Be prepared for that. I am. Andrew drove home in silence. The hearing had lasted less than an hour, but he felt exhausted, drained in a way that had nothing to do with physical effort. 8 years of marriage dissolved in 53 minutes. The house felt emptier than usual. Susan's belongings were gone. Clothes, cosmetics, the decorative pillows she'd insisted on buying for the couch. The nursery upstairs still had the crib and changing table, but Susan had stripped away everything else. The walls were bare, the closet empty. Andrew stood in the doorway, looking at the room they'd spent 2 months preparing. Soft yellow paint, white trim, a wooden rocking chair by the window, all of it for a child that wasn't his. He closed the door and went downstairs. His phone showed 3 missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize and a text from Jake. Mom told me everything. I'm sorry, man. Let me know if you need anything. Andrew set the phone aside and made himself dinner, grilled chicken and rice, simple and mechanical. He ate at the kitchen table, the house silent except for the refrigerator's hum and the occasional creak of old wood settling. This was what victory looked like. Clean, solitary, empty. 3 weeks after the first hearing, Dennis called with news. The biological father surfaced. Name's Dylan Creer. Works in commercial real estate. Lives 40 minutes from you. Andrew was in his truck between delivery stops, engine idling in a grocery store parking lot. How'd you find him? Susan's phone records. Thousands of texts over 6 months, including several the week of conception. We subpoenaed him for a deposition, and he confirmed the affair. Said it ended when Susan told him she was pregnant and planned to claim you were the father. Dennis paused. He wanted no part of it. Told her explicitly not to contact him again. Signed an affidavit stating he has no interest in parental rights or responsibilities. Andrew leaned back against the headrest, staring at the gray November sky through his windshield. So she tried to use me because he refused to help. Exactly. And it gets better or worse, depending on perspective. Dylan provided text messages where Susan explicitly discussed her plan to secure the house and financial support from you. She put it in writing? Oh, yes. Multiple times. Talking about how the pregnancy would lock things down, how you'd never leave her while she was carrying a child, how she deserved security after investing years in this marriage. Dennis's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. She documented her own fraud. When's the next hearing? 2 weeks. This one's about asset division, but Pierce asked for a sidebar. He wants to discuss the text messages. The texts were entered into evidence 4 days later. Dennis sent Andrew PDFs of the relevant conversations. 47 pages of messages between Susan and Dylan that painted a clear picture of calculation and deceit. Susan, February 16th, he'll never know. The timing works out close enough. Dylan, February 16th, what if he asks questions? Susan, February 16th, I'll handle it. He trusts me. Susan, February 23rd, pregnancy test positive. This is perfect timing, actually. Dylan, February 23rd, perfect for you, maybe. Susan, February 23rd, for us. Dylan, February 23rd, there's no us. We agreed this was casual. Susan, March 4th, I need to tell you something. I'm keeping it. Dylan, March 5th, that's your choice. Don't put my name on anything. Susan, March 5th, I'm listing Andrew as the father. He'll never know the difference. Dylan, March 5th, that's fraud. Susan, March 5th, that's survival. I've given 8 years to this marriage. I deserve security. Dylan, March 6th, don't contact me again. Andrew read through them twice, sitting in his truck outside the warehouse during lunch break. Each message was a small cut, not painful individually, but cumulatively devastating. Susan had planned this, calculated every step, used him as insurance against Dylan's indifference. He forwarded the documents to Jake with a brief message. This is what I'm dealing with. The response came back in minutes. Holy shit. I'm sorry. Mom needs to see this. She will. At the hearing. The second hearing drew a larger audience. Word had spread through Warren's tight-knit community about the divorce and its unusual circumstances. The courtroom's public seating area was half full when Andrew arrived. Curious neighbors, courthouse regulars, and reporters from the local paper who'd gotten wind of something interesting. Susan sat on her side of the courtroom looking diminished, her pregnancy now obvious at 8 months along. Her sister sat behind her, glaring at Andrew with open hostility. Gerald Pierce looked tired. Judge Weaver entered at 9 sharp. We're here to finalize asset division in case 24 DR 1847. I've reviewed the submitted evidence, including recent text message exchanges. Mr. Pierce, would you like to address these? Pierce stood slowly. Your Honor, my client acknowledges that certain communications were poorly worded. However, they were taken out of context and don't reflect. Mr. Pierce. Judge Weaver's voice was sharp. Your client explicitly stated in writing that she planned to misrepresent paternity to secure financial gain from her husband. This is textbook fraud. She was emotional, scared, not thinking clearly. She was thinking clearly enough to document her plan in detail. Judge Weaver looked at Susan. Mrs. Harlan, do you dispute the authenticity of these messages? Susan stood with difficulty, both hands supporting her back. Her voice was quiet, defeated. No, Your Honor. Did you knowingly misrepresent paternity? A long pause. Susan's hands moved to her belly, protective and futile at once. I hoped Andrew was the father. I didn't know for sure. But you suspected otherwise? Yes. And you chose not to disclose this to your husband? I was scared. I didn't know what would happen if. Susan's voice broke. She started crying, but this time it felt different. Not performative, just exhausted. I didn't think it would go this far. You initiated demands for the house, child support, and long-term alimony based on a pregnancy you knew might not be your husband's. Judge Weaver removed her glasses. Mrs. Harlan, do you understand the gravity of what you've done? Yes. Barely a whisper. Fraud in family court proceedings is a serious offense. It wastes judicial resources and causes significant harm. I could hold you in contempt. I could refer this for criminal prosecution. Pierce stood quickly. Your Honor, my client is 8 months pregnant and has suffered enough. She has suffered consequences of her own choices, Mr. Pierce. There's a difference. Judge Weaver put her glasses back on. However, I'm not inclined toward punitive measures beyond what's already occurred. The facts of this case are now public record. Mrs. Harlan will carry the social and professional consequences of her actions. That's punishment enough. She looked at both lawyers. Here's my ruling. Asset division will be equitable as previously stated. The house will be sold, proceeds split 50-50. No alimony, no child support. Mr. Harlan is legally absolved of all financial responsibility for the child. Mrs. Harlan will pay her own legal costs and will additionally pay 30% of Mr. Harlan's legal costs for misrepresenting material facts to this court. Gerald Pierce slumped. Your Honor, my ruling stands. Is there any other business? No, Your Honor. Then this case is concluded. I wish both parties the best moving forward. Judge Weaver's eyes lingered on Susan. Mrs. Harlan, I hope you find the support you need. But you won't find it through deception. The gavel struck. Final. Andrew stood as the courtroom emptied. Susan remained seated, her sister's arm around her shoulders, both of them crying quietly. Gerald Pierce gathered his papers with mechanical efficiency, avoiding eye contact. Dennis clapped Andrew on the shoulder. It's over. Yeah, you should feel good about this. I don't feel anything. They walked outside into cold November sunshine. Dead leaves scattered across the courthouse steps, blown by wind that cut through Andrew's suit jacket. Dennis handed him a business card. My final invoice will be lower than expected. Pierce's client is covering most of it. He smiled faintly. That almost never happens. Thanks for everything, Dennis. Just doing my job. Dennis hesitated. For what it's worth, you handled this the right way. You could have gotten angry, gotten messy. Instead, you stayed calm and let the truth do the work. Didn't feel like there was another option. There always is. Most people take it. Dennis nodded toward his car. Take care of yourself, Andrew. Andrew drove back to work, arriving halfway through the afternoon shift. Thompson flagged him down in the warehouse, grinning. Heard you won. Word travels fast. Small town. Everyone knows everyone's business. Thompson sobered slightly. Susan's sister was posting about it. Said you ruined a pregnant woman's life out of spite. People can think what they want. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Can't let someone lie their way into your wallet. Andrew nodded and got back to work. Loading trucks, checking inventory, solving logistical puzzles. Predictable patterns that required no emotional energy. The days that followed were strange. People stared at Andrew in the grocery store. Some nodded approvingly. Others looked away, uncomfortable or disapproving. Susan's version of events still circulated in certain circles. The wounded pregnant woman abandoned by her heartless husband. But the court documents were public record. Anyone who wanted the truth could find it. Jake came over one evening with pizza and beer. They ate in silence for a while, the television playing a basketball game neither of them watched. Mom's worried about you, Jake said finally. I'm fine. Are you, though? Andrew set down his beer. What else should I be? I don't know. Angry? Sad? Something. I'm relieved. Jake studied him. That's it? Just relieved? What do you want me to say? That I'm devastated? I'm not. Susan made her choices. I made mine. It's done. 8 years, man. 8 years down the drain. Only if you see it that way. Andrew picked at the pizza crust on his plate. Or you can see it as 8 years where I learned exactly what I don't want in my life. Jake laughed, sharp and surprised. That's pretty cold. It's practical. Whatever helps you sleep at night. But Andrew was sleeping fine. Better than he had in months, actually. The guest bedroom had become his bedroom. The house was quiet and orderly. No arguments. No tension, no pretending, just patterns he could predict and control. 2 months later, Susan gave birth to a girl. Andrew heard about it through the grapevine. Thompson's wife knew someone who worked at the hospital. Mother and baby healthy. Dylan never showed up. Susan's sister and mother were there instead. Andrew felt nothing. Not joy, not sadness, not curiosity. The child existed in a separate reality, one that didn't intersect with his. The house sold in January. A young couple with a toddler bought it, charmed by the neighborhood and the good school district. Andrew signed the papers without ceremony and took his half of the proceeds, enough for a sizable down payment on something smaller, somewhere quieter. He rented a one-bedroom apartment near the warehouse while he looked for a new place. The apartment was plain, furnished with the minimum required for basic living. A bed, a table, a chair, a television he rarely turned on. Susan moved in with her mother after the birth. The alimony she demanded would have paid for a decent apartment, maybe even a small house. Without it, she had nothing but family charity and whatever assistance program she qualified for. Dylan continued his policy of total avoidance, ignoring repeated attempts at contact. Andrew learned these details not because he asked, but because people couldn't help sharing. The fall of someone who tried to rise through manipulation was too compelling to keep quiet. He ran into Susan's sister at the pharmacy one March afternoon. Rachel, that was her name. She saw him in the pain reliever aisle and marched over, fury radiating from her. "Are you happy now?" she demanded. Andrew looked at her calmly. "I'm fine, thanks. How are you?" "Susan's broke, living with our mom, struggling to afford diapers." "That's unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Rachel's voice rose. "You destroyed her life." "No, I refuse to pay for someone else's choices." Andrew picked up the bottle of ibuprofen he'd come for. "There's a difference. She has a baby who needs support. From her biological father, not from me. Dylan won't help." Then Susan should have chosen better. Andrew moved toward the checkout. "Excuse me." Rachel followed him. "You're heartless. Cruel. You could have helped her anyway. Out of decency." Andrew stopped and turned. Decency would have been Susan telling me the truth from the beginning. Decency would have been not trying to commit fraud. Decency would have been accepting responsibility instead of playing victim. He met Rachel's eyes. "I didn't destroy Susan's life. She did that herself." He paid for the ibuprofen and left. Rachel stood in the aisle, staring after him with impotent rage. That night, Andrew sat in his sparse apartment and thought about patterns. Susan had followed a predictable trajectory: lie, manipulate, play victim, demand sympathy. When that failed, she escalated. When escalation failed, she collapsed. And now she was living with the consequences. Not because Andrew was cruel, because mathematics didn't care about feelings. Actions had consequences. Lies had costs. Fraud had penalties. These were patterns as reliable as inventory movement or shipping schedules. Susan had bet on Andrew being too conflict-averse to call her bluff, too attached to the marriage to risk ending it, too concerned with appearances to make the truth public. She'd been wrong on all counts. Andrew stood and walked to the window. His apartment overlooked the parking lot. Nothing scenic or inspiring, just cars and streetlights and the distant hum of highway traffic. But it was his, paid for with money he earned, free from lies and manipulation and carefully constructed narratives. He thought about the baby, Dylan's daughter, not his, and felt only abstract curiosity about how she would grow up. Would Susan tell her the truth someday? Would she paint Andrew as the villain who abandoned them? It didn't matter. The girl would eventually have access to court records if she wanted them. She could draw her own conclusions. Andrew's phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Dinner this Sunday? Jake and Emily are coming." He replied, "I'll be there." Life continued. Patterns emerged, predictable and manageable. Work, meals, exercise, occasional social obligations with family who'd stopped asking if he was okay and started accepting that he was. 3 months after the divorce finalized, Andrew found a small house on the edge of Warren, a 1970s ranch with a decent yard and a garage large enough for his truck. The price was reasonable. The neighborhood was quiet. No trimmed lawns or identical mailboxes, just a mix of working-class families and retirees who kept to themselves. He bought it outright with the money from the house sale and his savings. No mortgage, no debt, no obligations to anyone but himself. The moving process was simple. He didn't have much. The apartment had been temporary storage more than a home. He loaded everything into his truck in 2 trips and spent his Saturday arranging furniture and hanging his few pictures. Jake came by that evening with Chinese takeout. They sat on the back porch as the sun set, eating directly from the containers. "Place looks good," Jake said. "It'll do. You sound like an old man." "It'll do. You're 34, not 60. Andrew smiled slightly. "Just being practical. You're always practical. Maybe too practical." Jake set down his container. "When are you going to start dating again?" "Not interested." "Come on. Not every woman is like Susan." "I know that." "Then what?" Andrew considered the question while chewing beef and broccoli. "I'm not against the idea of dating. I'm just not seeking it out. If something happens naturally, fine, but I'm not going to pretend I'm in a rush." "Fair enough." Jake picked up his beer. "For what it's worth, I think you handled everything better than most people would have. You could have gone scorched earth, but you just let the truth do its thing. Seemed like the most efficient option." Jake laughed. "Efficient. That's one way to put it." They finished eating as darkness settled over the neighborhood. Streetlights flickered on. A dog barked somewhere nearby. Normal sounds. Comfortable. After Jake left, Andrew walked through his new house, testing the silence. It felt different from the apartment. More solid, more permanent. This was his foundation now, built on truth instead of performance. Supported by choices he'd made consciously rather than drifted into. The divorce was 6 months behind him. Susan's due date had been 4 months ago. The baby existed somewhere in the world, growing and changing, completely separate from his life. And that was fine. Andrew sat on his couch, a second-hand piece he'd bought from a furniture consignment shop, and turned on the television. A documentary about supply chain logistics was playing. He watched it without really paying attention, letting the narrator's voice fill the empty space. Some people might have felt lonely in this moment, might have regretted the lost marriage, the lost potential family, the lost future that had evaporated when truth replaced lies. Andrew felt none of that. He felt clean, unburdened, free from the weight of someone else's deception. The pattern had completed itself. Action, consequence, resolution. As predictable as sunrise. He had survived Susan's betrayal not through anger or revenge, but through simple insistence on accuracy. She had lied. He had found proof. The system had corrected the imbalance. Mathematics. The documentary ended. Andrew turned off the television and sat in the darkness for a while, listening to the house settle around him. Old wood creaking, the furnace clicking on, the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Patterns within patterns. Predictable. Manageable. True.